Hey there, I am at the end of a very long week of cleaning up a hacked website. And I want to talk about what brought this site down because I see this happen far too often and it's an easily avoidable thing. And this is the idea that turning on auto updates is a perfectly acceptable WordPress maintenance plan. It is not. This is a terrible plan, and I will tell you many reasons why. But first, let me introduce myself. I am Jeff. I am the owner of PixelJar. We've been in business for over 20 years now, working with WordPress since 2007. We worked with the Dallas Mavericks, we worked with Murray Forleo, and hundreds of other small businesses just like yours. We are a small business ourselves, and this is why I like to help other small businesses, because I understand what you're going through. You probably understand what I'm going through. And so if we can help out in any way, we would like to do that. So if you're running a small business, your website is probably one of the most important assets you have. So maintaining it is super important. This is like having car insurance. It's not exciting, but it sure is necessary because when you get into trouble, you really want it to be there. And WordPress maintenance is a big part of that. And it's not just the updates of the plugins, it's also the backups, it's the monitoring, uptime, all those things that you're probably not checking and you absolutely should be because it's so important. If you're running a website that's doing memberships or e-commerce or collecting forms, any sort of data that you cannot afford to lose. More importantly, if your website is your online validation that you are a company that exists and it proves your authority in the field, you cannot go down. These are things, again, so vitally important. Many of these are super easy to avoid. So let's talk about the dangers of auto updates and why this is not a viable WordPress maintenance plan. Number one, when you turn auto updates on, one thing it'll never check for is plugin conflicts. It's just going to go through update, 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 and you never know if one of these is going to trip up another one. Remember that these plugins are not, they're vetted a little bit, but they're written by 1,000 different people with 1,000 different perspectives on how to correctly program PHP and all the underlying JavaScript and everything that goes into a WordPress plugin. Many of these do not talk to each other nicely and will either make another plugin come down or actually bring the entire site down. So this is when you get your white screen of death or you get the error message on your screen. Auto updates is not going to check for this. It's just going to auto update until that error comes up and then it can't auto update anymore. And it's not even going to notify you that everything went down. It's just going to stop. You're going to come back to your website in the morning. It's going to be an error or a white screen or whatever you see. And you're going to be the one that's panicking because you were not ready for this situation to happen. So plugin conflicts. Number one way that auto updates are going to bring your site down. This is why you want to update either in a staging setting or at very minimum, make sure you make a backup before you do your auto updates so that you can revert to the old backup should something go wrong. Number two, and I see this way more often than you would expect, is abandoned plugins. So again, auto updates, all they're looking for is there an update? If so, update. What it's not checking is when was the last time there was an update to this plugin? And sometimes it was 6 months ago. It could be a year ago. On one site, I actually saw that it was 8 years prior to when I went in to look. Again, the site had come down. The reason was this plugin stopped being updated by the author. The person on the web running the website never noticed. And eventually it got so out of date that when PHP updated itself on the host, the site just took everything down. And again, that's a small thing that could happen. What really could happen that's even more dangerous is if software is always updating, right? So if something becomes exploitable and then there's a patch for it, if the thing never gets patched, then that exploit is there in your site waiting for a hacker to find it. And that's the last thing we want. Although I will say real quickly, for as many times as I've cleaned up a hacked site, it's been about 5 to 10 times more often I've cleaned up the site because an owner has tripped over their own feet and brought down their own site. So this is as much about hackers as it is about us taking care of our own business here. So the abandoned plugins, it's never going to tell you that a plugin has stopped being developed. So you have to be proactive about checking those plugins every 6 months or so to make sure that they're still actively being updated. Because if not, you need to find an alternative to whatever that functionality is so that you are not a target for hackers. Let's talk about themes a little bit. Sometimes a good, and this isn't always the case, but generally you want a parent theme and a child theme so that if you want to make any customizations, you make them in the child theme because the parent theme is the one that gets updated. And if this sounds all super nerdy, please go find someone to do your website maintenance for you, which I will talk about again at the end of this. But If you're making your customizations in a theme that is going to be updated, your customizations are going to get overwritten if you do not do them correctly. I have seen this happen many, many times. People put a lot of work into their customizations and then they just gone. And if you didn't make a backup ahead of time, you cannot get back to them. It is a lot of energy lost. So always make sure that you're using the parent-child theme format if you're making any customizations. Better still, if you're making customizations, do them in a custom plugin. That way, if you ever decide to change themes, you don't have to try and strip those customizations out of the old theme and put them into the new theme. They're hanging out in their own location and they're independent of the theme, which is the best. And this is important because, again, if you put your theme on the auto update and it's the parent theme where you're making your customizations, this thing's just going to write over itself without you ever even knowing. And then we have WordPress itself. Again, if you're setting WordPress to auto update on its own, and many hosts you will be on will do this for you without your choice, because they always want to be up on the latest version, which makes sense because there's always a lot of security patches and you do want your website to be as secure as possible, especially if you're the host, because they're on a shared server, and if one site goes down, it brings down all the other sites on that same server. This can bring everything down as well. And again, this is just auto updates, just doing what they're supposed to do and not realizing that something's going to happen or crash, especially with those major updates where if the plugins hadn't been checked ahead of time, there's always that possibility that all that new technology is going to bring down the old technology. And I want to say everyone does their best to make sure this doesn't happen, but nothing's foolproof and nothing's 100% secure. Which brings me to the next point, which is there is no verification process when you're doing auto updates. What I mean by that is no auto updates don't check that they actually auto update. They just run their thing and then off they go again. You don't really get a notification of an update or that maybe that it didn't run. And this is the thing that I've seen people run into as well, is they think auto updates are on, but something tripped them up along the way. They turn themselves off because of some sort of security measure. And then 6 months go by or a year goes by and the plugin gets really old and it brings down the website. And again, this is because no one's going in to make sure the auto updates are actually doing their auto updates. A lot of this is to say that you can AI this as much as you want, but you've got to have some human oversight all the time because there are many points along the way where things can fail and you're never going to get a notification that the failure has happened. So now let's talk about backups. This is the crux of everything in my opinion. This is so important. If something happens to your website, or let's say when something happens to your website, if your website's up long enough, eventually something is going to happen that will bring down your website. You've absolutely got to have backups. And you don't have to just have backups. You have to have backups that are not on your hosting server. And these are backups that you're able to restore. Those are three super important things. So number one, be making backups. And the question we often get is, how often do you make backups? And we always say, how much data can you afford to lose? If you're doing a website that's doing 4, 5, 6 sales a day, first of all, congratulations. You probably can't afford to lose more than a couple hours worth of work. And so you probably want to be backing up every couple hours. If you're doing a form fill a day, every 24 hours, you want to be making a backup. But this is how you can kind of judge how much can you afford to lose. At a minimum, I would say back it up every day. And make sure that those backups are available for a good amount of time. With a lot of hosts, they will say they do daily backups, but what they don't tell you is that they delete those backups after 3 days. So you only have 3 days of daily backups. And if you didn't notice the hack had happened until 7 days later, which can happen, some hacks are not immediately visible. Again, very clever hackers will get into your site and they're going to wait a long time before they actually do something, or they're just exploiting you the whole time and you just never even noticed. And this can go on for weeks or months, I've seen. If you don't have backups that go back far enough beforehand, backing up to a hacked version of your site is going to do you very little good. Number two, those backups need to be off-site. So this is something I've seen happen multiple times as well, where backups are being made, but they're being put on the same server that the website lives on. So when the server went down, which happened in this case, we were not able to access the backups, and therefore those backups were absolutely useless. So put those backups somewhere else completely, and if you want to be super redundant, put them on a second location. I'm a big fan of super redundancy. And yeah, I get teased a lot about that, but There have been many times where those secondary backups or secondary redundancies were actually the thing that saved us. And then finally, the restore is the absolutely crucial element of this. So we've had this happen before where somebody gave us a backup, but it was not a viable backup that we could then use to restore the website. If your backups can't be used, then again, useless backups. So do this and test it every month or so that you can back up and do it on a staging site. Do some testing every now and again to make sure those restores are actually working the way they're supposed to. Because the last thing you want is to think that you've got it all in the bag and then it turns out you didn't have the bag at all. Let's talk about timing gaps. Usually we recommend doing your updates about every 2 weeks. You can do them as often as you want, but it is a bit of a process, and if you don't have the kind of time you need to take to do a proper update, every 2 weeks is pretty good. However, there is the caveat that every now and again, the WordPress world does find a vulnerability with a plugin, and it is a crucial and vital vulnerability that's found that needs to be patched immediately. So every site that we monitor, when we see one of those, we will make that update outside of that 2 week cycle because it is so important not to be a hacking target. And again, if you're running on auto updates and you're just kind of waiting for those auto updates to take care of it for you, we've seen sites get hacked even though they had the auto updates on. The plugin was out of date just long enough that the hackers found it and exploited the website. And again, this is a thing auto updates are not looking for. They're not looking for vulnerabilities. They're just it's just a timed cycle of when things need to get updated, and then they just do the updates blindly. So all that is to say that auto updates aren't inherently bad, they're just not enough. Your website is probably one of the most vital assets to your business, and you should treat it accordingly. And if any of the stuff that I've said sounds nerdy or over your head, then I strongly encourage you to hire a professional to do it for you. And it doesn't have to be me. I'd be happy to do it, but find someone. This is the equivalent of hiring someone else to do your taxes or hiring a professional plumber. Because yeah, maybe you can fix the thing that's going on, but there's a good chance you're just going to cause a flood, and that's so much worse. And the same with your taxes or your mechanic. Sure, I could probably change my oil, but I'm going to go to a professional mechanic because he's also going to check my brakes and my battery and all the other things that are important to keeping me safe while I'm driving that I'm not going to know how to do because that mechanic has so much more expertise than I do. More importantly, what is your time worth? Maybe you actually could do a good job at this, but is this how your time is best spent? Or should you be focused on your business and you need to delegate some stuff here? This is one of those things we never really realize when we're entrepreneurs, is that when you go into business, there's a lot more things that you're going to have to do than just the thing you went into business for. And some of those things need to be unloaded. So if this is one of those things, again, find a professional. They'll do a great job. They'll do it for a price that makes sense for you. And you will get to focus on the thing that you want to focus on, which is your business. And again, your website is your storefront, it's your lead generator, it's your content hub, it's your client's first touch point, it's your validation. So if your website goes down, you're losing trust, you're losing sales, you're losing leads. Do not let your site go down. Do not wait until something breaks. Be proactive, be on top of it. You got this. I believe in you. Have a great day.